Bastani was doing some interesting tweeting yesterday or the day before, and actually, he was on the Telegraph podcast talking about lowering the threshold at which you pay tax,
Yeah.
starting to pay from like 8K rather than 12.5.
Oh.
Yeah, so more people pay tax, and
Um.
everyone else is taxed on more of their income. Like
Yeah.
I think I think it obviously, like, that's an enormously politically unpopular thing to do, as is, for example, trying to break the triple lock. In fact, largely touching anything other than a wealth tax, which there is more of a political constituency for because fewer people are, by simple fact, fewer people are wealthy. But I liked the way he framed the argument, which was that essentially we all need to pay more tax because the scale of the problem is really significant. And yeah, okay, wealth tax. Why not also land value tax? Why not expand inheritance tax? Why not increase stamp duty? Why not?
I think that land value tax is the most obvious tax.
Yeah.
I think that, I like Aaron Bastani.
Mm,
I enjoy his, I'm a big fan of his tweets, actually.
yeah.
Um,
Never goes too far. Like me.
so let me just pick this apart.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
8K,
Yeah.
there is almost an already de facto, there's a limbo between 8 and 12K, right? The
Mhm.
point, because it's around 7,700. That's the cap, or it was the cap. Under that, you could receive free school meals. So that's when you're perceived to be in absolute poverty,
Mm.
right? Below the 8K. Do I think that someone who is in receipt of 8.5K a year is in absolute poverty? No. Do I think that you could have a more complicated tax system where, say, say your partner earns 150,000 and you earn £10,000, you probably should be paying 2K. That you probably should have your threshold
Oh,
brought down to
interesting.
8K. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Because you should
okay.
be looking at the combined household
Do
income
you
there.
think?
Do you see what I'm saying? Because then,
Wow, okay.
because that could then be a benefit for single parent households or single person households
Mm,
who have to take on all of the burden, but don't have, or single earner households, I should say. But then that would discourage people from taking up work.
I think it's really hard when you start treating, beyond relatively simple and minor measures like, marriage tax credits, for example.
Mm.
When you start
But they're
treating,
outdated though.
yeah,
That needs, because a lot of people don't want to get married anymore.
yeah. Look, I'm not in favour of, oh, okay, you're not married, but you've lived together for 15 years, arbitrary, whatever. Here's your tax credit. Fine. I'm just saying, I think you get into sticky. You're overcomplicating things if you're like, no, we're going to decide the basis of your taxation on your combined income, which is one of the problems I think with a wealth tax. Is the relative difficulty of like appraising everyone's wealth and tax them. It's not a reason
That's
not
why
to
it's
do
not
it.
difficult to do a land value tax.
100%. And I think it was Harry Lambert when he came in to talk about his Great Tax Con, I think was the name of the New Statesman piece he wrote a couple of years ago, talking about the disparities in council tax, where someone in Kensington is paying the same, sometimes even less than someone in Bolton, when the value of their properties, let's say there's a differential of like literally 10 times the price for a townhouse in Kensington versus, I don't know, end of terrace, semi-detached, or a terraced house in Bolton. But by virtue of, the political control of the council, they're paying roughly
Yes.
comparable because of bans. And in actual fact, it's kind of nuts.
The band stuff is nuts, because I often think about that in my one person flat.
Mm.
Why my council tax is the same as my parents. I'm often like, that's nuts. Like,
Yeah. I think that could be simplified for sure. I mean, there's a whole host of things you could do to address the situation we're in. I think you've seen the welfare rebellion demonstrated to them the appetite from from the Parliamentary Labour Party to further cut really any component of the welfare state is minimal, and they're now emboldened by the victory that they had on that piece of legislation. They don't really have anywhere else to turn other than increasing taxes. I think you could.
don't agree.
Oh, okay.
First point, though, on the council tax point,
Mm.
I think a levy would be interesting for people who use certain services who can pay. because we are all going to have to see council tax increases. It's going to happen in the next year.
Well, the local authority budgets are like trash.
Tanked. And most of that is because of the temporary accommodation fiasco.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, yeah.
But I do think that there is a question here about like, if you have the point I made about my parents is that, because what I'm saying is my council tax now is the same as what they were paying when there were 4 people living in that house. So obviously you've got more rubbish that needs to be collected. You've got 2 who are using the schools. Like, do you know what I mean? And like, those who can pay, perhaps your levy should be higher than someone who is not using any of those. But then I guess it kind of goes back, because then later generations will pay for when I want to use it. That's complicated.
Yeah.
The other point was, they started in the autumn statement with this very interesting idea of balancing the books by, if we invest, it doesn't count as expenditure. I'm talking about this very loosely.
Yeah, borrowing for capital spend, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that to me is actually very interesting, because they seem to have abandoned that idea. They're still doing it in some cases of the energy, but more or less, I mean, we haven't heard about the National Wealth Fund in how long?
Yeah. No, I think the scope and scale of what they've done in terms of borrowing to build is good. I think it could be bigger. I also don't think you'll start the downstream consequences of any of those projects, whether that's sort of transport infrastructure, new nuclear power plants, deregulating and easing up connections to the national grid, for example. The growth benefits of a lot of that stuff are years away, right?
But you've
And
got to do it.
yeah, no, for sure you have to do it.
I also
And
don't agree with that, because the jobs benefit of that actually could be immediate. If you put literal shovels in the soil tomorrow,
Yeah.
those are like 2,000 jobs suddenly.
Yeah.
And people paying into the exchequer with tax.
But I
and
mean,
it's
it's
spending power.
Yeah, it's slow burn though, isn't it? Because as discussed, like the planning system does not permit them to put the shovels in the ground tomorrow.
I thought they were blitzing through that.
Yeah, I'd hope so as well. What I mean more is kind of, the aggregate benefit of, let's say, a ring road or a bypass, the net economic effect in a local area versus paying the blokes to build the road, which, yes, has an economic benefit, but I'm talking about more the kind of, aggregate, the agglomeration of all of these projects lifting national GDP. It is downstream of where we are right now.
Okay. Sorry to keep fighting you on the beaches.
That's fine.
But the whole premise of the New Deal
Yeah.
was to build infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's how they got the US economy back on track. So the whole principle of the FDR New Deal was to get people working on government infrastructure. So I disagree with you.
No, I'm not seeking to minimize the simple Keynesian argument of stimulate the economy by pay person to dig a hole, pay person to fill in the hole, I'm not saying that doesn't have a stimulating effect on the economy. I'm just saying,
It does stimulate, doesn't it? Fill in that hole. Carry on.
I'm just saying that the agglomerating effect of dramatically improving transport or trying to cheapen energy costs or whatever infrastructure project you're talking about, some of the benefits they take time to come through. Like, you don't immediately, if you say, right, we're going to build a new nuclear power station. Yes, you're paying the blokes to build it, but there's a period of time that it takes to get built. There's a period of time before it starts to bring down energy costs. There's a period of time before you start to hire people to fill the power station. Like, I'm just saying that whilst all of that stuff is important, it's not immediate.
Okay, but if you don't do it, then you end up in a situation that we're in now, which is like
100%, yeah.
when Nick Clegg was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, it
absolutely.
would take 15 years
What's
to
the point?
derealize nuclear," and now
Yeah.
we're still talking about fucking Sizewell C.
Yeah, I totally agree. You've been watching a clip of the Politics Joe podcast. If you'd like to watch the rest of the episode, head to our Patreon, patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. It's the only place you can watch full podcast episodes. From £4 a month, you get access to that video podcast, as well as the group chat and first access to live event tickets. The first of those live events is next month. It's sold out in 4 minutes. Zoom. Was that the klaxon?
Yeah, it's half-arsed, wasn't it?
Yeah. Live event klaxon, please, Sean.
Was that it?
Well, my voice is gone from the weekend as well, so it's not really projecting as well as it could.
We are really looking forward to seeing all of you having a beer and a bit of a chit chat. 1,080 of you have generously chosen to support us on Patreon so far. Become Patreon number 1,081. Head to PoliticsJOE.com. Sorry, head to patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. I'm making a right old meal of this. Or the pod is free to listen to still on all audio platforms. Thank you.